my own experience is there are certain goods and services and products which are what economists call experience goods. Think of 18-year-olds drinking lager, okay? You start off drinking lager, and let's be honest about it, most people when they start drinking beer think, this doesn't taste very nice.
This is why alcohol-free beer brands, I had a really interesting conversation with my mate who's got a beer brand called Local, as in low, it's a play on words, local as in going to your local boozer, but local as in low
very,
calorie.
very neat name.
Yeah, very, very neat name. And he was basically saying the issue with alcohol-free, and I don't know whether I agree with it, but it was an interesting point, was that the market's kind of capped with people who are over 30 or 25 who have done the sort of binge drinking, who actually like the taste of beer. Because if you're a 16-year-old, drinking beer is pretty putrid, to be honest.
You might also argue, which is possible, that if you've been drinking alcoholic beer for 15, 20 years, the power of suggestion means that non-alcoholic beer arouses in you something of the same relaxation and conviviality that's achieved by alcohol. Now, we know this from an old barman's trick, which is that if you have, it only works with heavy gin drinkers, typically found in golf clubs.
Right.
You take a glass, okay, you dip the rim in gin to give it the smell, and then you basically give people a tonic water, okay, and with a bit of ice and lemon.
Yeah.
What's interesting about it is that regular gin drinkers often don't notice. Weirder still, they manifest drunkenness because they think they've had 4 double G&Ts and they behave as though they have, even though the alcohol in their blood alcohol level is 0. Or possibly you might do this only after they've had the first legitimate gin and tonic, but you can continue as a barman serving them tonic water effectively and charging them for G&Ts. A famous story, which I have to be very careful about because it needs to maintain confidentiality, is of a High Court judge somewhere, and I won't say where, who was breathalyzed leaving a golf club. The breathalyzer went green, saving his career and reputation. And he immediately went back and demanded the barman was fired for watering down the drinks. Okay, somewhat ungratefully, I would argue. Now, what I notice as someone who's drunk beer, alcoholic beer, quite a lot, is that I don't know if you've had this. Do you drink no alcohol?
I do this thing called zebra stripes, which is basically where you go in and you, because if I'm doing, I will go for 8-9 pints and that will just send me off and I'll be fucked, right?
Got it. So you actually alternate.
It's something that's like, it's probably once in a blue moon it actually happens, but I've either done the full time off it, or I do this zebra type thing, whereas I've had 2 or 3 pints, feeling a bit squiffy, parachute in an alcohol-free, and then go back on. And it is actually probably the nicest way to drink.
It also, by the way, enables people to escape the worst effects of the round system, which is you're often forced to drink at the pace of the booziest person there. Because the round system undoubtedly imposes kind of,
this is why because my mates are big city boys and they can drink like parched trouts. You know what I mean? They can just get it, put it back like it's no end.
And one of the interesting things I experience as someone who's drunk alcoholic beer is that I will go and have 2 or 3 pints of non-alcoholic beer, or half a pint or 1 pint of alcoholic beer followed by 2 non-alcoholic beers. Driving home from the station an hour later, I suddenly experience a panic attack because I think I shouldn't be driving, and then I remember it was non-alcoholic.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird.
The power of suggestion, then? Is this what you're talking about? What's that?
Yeah, I mean, you could argue it's placebo drunkenness. There is even a theory that regular drinkers that actually regular drinkers will exhibit drunken behaviour before the alcohol's had a chance to hit home. And the argument is that we partly drink to make ourselves drunk, but we partly drink because the act of drinking gives us internal permission to act in a slightly drunken way.
Yes.
And so it's the whole thing of cause and effect, that in psychology, cause and effect sometimes run backwards. Now, I had a bit of not a row, but a bit of a debate with people who said the Nespresso brand doesn't chime very well with Gen Z. And I said,
why are they saying that?
Well, you might argue that, the imagery was what you might call
the George Clooney advert.
Middle-aged person's idea of luxury or indulgence rather than the younger person's idea of indulgence. You could make that case. I mean, to some extent it makes economic sense in a continent, Europe, where, the old are quite a lot richer than the young.
Yeah, sure.
But one of the points I made is that actually the Nespresso brand may not resonate. It may be that young people don't buy Nespresso machines because the Nespresso brand doesn't resonate. Or it might be the reverse, which is that because young people don't buy Nespresso machines, they have no reason to like Nespresso as a brand.
Yeah.
And that actually, if you found a clever promotional mechanic that said, let's have an Nespresso student program, where a student house could share an espresso machine, because notably at the moment, one person has to pay. If you had a system where everybody divvies up £10 a month and you get your machine, you might change that problem. Okay, so the question is, does attitudinal change precede behavioural change? Well, yes, but also behavioural change occasions attitudinal
Would that
change.
be an example of a bottleneck as well?
I mean,
It could be, if say they're trying to open up their
people
market.
hate cars because they can't fucking drive.
Yeah.
Okay, Gen Z Londoners, you go to Devon. You don't find 18-year-olds who hate cars in Devon because your entire social life, indeed sexual life, is probably predicated on having access to a set of wheels. But young people who are floating around in their Ubers and their Tubes and their Boris bikes or whatever, they're not called that anymore, are they? But young people who are floating around on their Lime bikes and their whatever don't drive, so consequently they don't like cars.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not everything proceeds
That's
in this.
what we were talking about with Osh when we were had that lunch about how the bicycle in Ireland, you know, how that changed everything with before, like, people could actually start having sex with someone else in the other village.
Oh, yeah. Probably the effect on genetics. I think Steve Jones, the genetics professor, said the same thing, that the invention of the bicycle.
In Ireland?
Well, actually everywhere.
Oh, right,
was
everywhere.
surprisingly
Maybe go and shag
important
someone
because
else in another village.
your sphere of operations, we forget this because we think of a bicycle as a slow car, but compared to walking or riding normal speed on a horse, the bike was insanely fast. And
Especially
by the way,
if you're horny.
just as which probably gives you an additional impetus.
Got extra horsepower if you're doing that.
Yeah. And interestingly, one reason why we ought to be slightly more deferential as car drivers towards cyclists is that it was cyclists, not car drivers, who created the pressure to actually surface roads properly. So the pressure to actually tarmac roads, if you think about it, there was a cycling craze in the 19th century, long before the car had become a developed or mass form of transit. And so the initial pressure for macadamization, and of course it was more important because you can drive a Ford Model T over gravel fairly pleasantly, okay?
Yeah.
But cycling in rutted or badly or really rough terrain is, unpleasant, particularly with bone shakers, unpleasant at best and really dangerous at worst.
Espressos is sponsored by supply chain software gurus Unleashed. It talks to your e-com and accounting software. It's helped islands cut admin time in half, get granular clarity on your margins, know where your stock is, don't miss availability. Brands like Candy Kittens, Tiny Rebel and Trip all use Unleashed, and so should you.